Grief is something we all face, but often keep to ourselves and manage alone. Today, we're opening up about loss, how we grieve, and get through it. I'm Ms. Rebecca with an invitation to tap into what it means to grieve, love, and heal after loss. This is In Confianza. Andres and Curly, you are both here because you all are extremely talented. In your own words, how would you explain the content you create to folks?
I would say I'm like a content educator that like uses comedy and commentary because I kind of just talk about what's going on in the world while also like teaching Spanish and Spanglish. So I feel like that's kind of my content.
I feel like mine is about, it's kind of changed a lot because I've been kind of doing it for like, I mean, we were like around when people, we were still called like YouTubers, like, so, and, I started with BuzzFeed a long time ago. And so my content for a long time has been, at one point, it was like, we're tasting a bunch of different items from Starbucks, right? Then it was like, when we created our own Latino channel, which was Better Like, and we were creating content about like the intersectionality of identities, about being Latinos born in the U.S., kind of like talking about our parts of our identities, and then as I grew up, it became more and more about my relationship with my grandma online and kind of like dealing with because people during that time, I would bring her in to do videos with us. And then as we moved on, it became more about like her dementia. And so people were like so used to seeing us as best friends. And then they were there on the journey with me when she was starting to forget me, when she was starting to like forget who I was, but not forgetting the feeling that she felt when she was around me. And then now I'm kind of like, it's like hot takes. It's like day in the life. It's like, what do and what do I think about Capricorns and Tauruses and Virgos? And that seems to be what people are wanting to see right now.
Yeah, you both have evolved throughout your content for sure under this large umbrella of Latinidad, which we could spend hours, I'm sure, giving our own takes on what that even is. Is it even relevant? How do we even define ourselves? But I think what also brings us together and what brings us to have you all here in this space is you also have both been more vulnerable and in sharing, like you were mentioning, Curly, your own experiences and sharing yourselves more through the content that you've been creating. And grief is also a centerpiece of our conversations this season and you all's own life experience. I want to start with you, Curly, because you mentioned your grandmother, a huge person in your life through what we see on the other side of the screen.
Yeah.
You had such and have, because I know the relationship has transcended even beyond this physical plane. How was that journey for you beyond what you documented and seeing her pass on and pass through all of these stages? How are you living that grief as you were documenting and sharing it?
It's really interesting because I didn't understand grief until I dealt with something that was really this big, right? And like it was so strange because I the minute she passed away, I kind of dived into like this whole death community and what it means to grieve. And like, I heard this quote about how like, grief is the price that you pay for loving something, and you cannot have one without the other. And the only way to get through grief is to grieve. And so I feel like early on, I was grieving so much without even knowing it. Like I remember, so my for those who don't know, for those who are listening, like my grandma was like one of my best friends. Like she was crass, she was dirty, like she would make dick jokes all the time. She was interested in how gay people had sex, like, and I would record it. And people would be like, "How can you talk to your grandmother like this?" And I'm like, "I'm not. She's asking me questions. Like, I would never in a million years talk to an elder in this way, but she's doing this, and so I'm gonna play back with her." And we had this really beautiful relationship. And so, the first time I would say that it really hit me was the first time that she forgot me. The first time that she called me and she like didn't know my name. And this is somebody, and I always have to find emotions. This is somebody who like I think a lot of grandparents, I hope, or I hope you have somebody in your life that when you come to their house or you come over, they get really excited to see you. my grandma was the type of person that would be like, "Ay, mi niño, ya llegó mi niño." Da, 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 da. And there's no one else in my life that's that excited to see me besides my dogs, by the way. No one. So, like, with the moment that was kind of like, from her to go to that to be like, "Oh, who are you again?" It was devastating. And I think that began kind of like the process of grieving. I think grief looks different for everyone, right? Grief looks different. Like, if you're losing, like, and Andres, like, this is kind of, I think, will kind of lead to you as well. Like, I think when you're grieving a señora, a grandmother who is in her 80s, right? Like, that feels different because you kind of want somebody like, I want 10 more years, but like there's a part of you that goes like, I know you lived a good life. My tia just passed away. She's 52 years old. I love her so much. She's my favorite tia. It feels like an injustice. It
Right.
feels like an anger, right? I feel like, grief can sometimes look like that too. Like if you lose a friend who's maybe close to your age, like or just somebody who's a little bit younger, a child, like grief can feel sad, but you can also feel angry about it. You can feel like the binary of good and evil, or like the good people win, the bad people lose, like that's kind of disappears because you're like, how is somebody like my tia who's so beautiful like just gone? Meanwhile, like my sister's neighbor who's an asshole lives like three houses down is
Still chugging along.
alive and well.
Oh my gosh, Curly, that resonates so much. I lost my mom when I was 24,
Oh,
and
so sorry.
and she was so young.
I'm sorry.
Thank you all, and I'm sorry too for all of our loss. And it's exactly that. It's like when you, and I think, yeah, grief has layers. I totally agree, that first thing you said, and it comes up in different forms. Also, absolutely true. And it does matter, the relationship, the closeness, the time in which you're losing that person. When we're
Yeah.
talking about someone passing, right? Because there are many different types of grief that I want to touch on in this time with you all, but I can so relate to that, Curly. Like, I was angry for like 7 years.
Yeah.
Within my despair and sadness, I was like, she was 46. Like, what? Like, that's not supposed to happen, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it does take a different layer. I know you, Andres, because you mentioned, Curly, losing your close friend. I know that was your case. You recently lost a friend that was very close to you.
Yes, I did. I lost my best friend in January, and he was only 30, and it was very shocking. It was not expected. And I totally relate, Curly, to what you said, like the differences in grief between, like, I lost my parents, like my abuelita and my abuelito, like into 2019, and they both were like in their 70s, and like I thought they were gonna live until they were 100. Like in my mind, I was like, están vivos para siempre. But they got sick, and that, it was very sad, but it was something that my whole family, like we were all together, like grieving together. They all had a very peaceful death, like surrounded by us in our home. And that was, I would say, my first biggest experience with grief. And even though it obviously, tore me apart, once I got to this year and I lost my best friend Luke, it was like a whole different, like the injustice, like you said. It was like he didn't get, this fulfilling life. I mean, he fulfilled so many things in his life, but for a 30-year-old, it's just like feels differently. And I remember being like, when he passed, I remember being like, okay, like last time I kind of lost myself in my grief. This time I'm going to try to grieve as healthy as I can. And then I come to realize, like you said, there's no one way to grieve, and like there's no easy way to grieve.
I think it also matters how the person passes and why. I'm curious, Andres, how did your friend pass away? He was so young.
Yeah, so unfortunately, he was dealing with alcoholism, and the whole year leading up to it, like I started noticing more and more how much he was struggling with alcohol. And then he also was having seizures, which at the time I didn't even know that you could have seizures because of alcohol. And so
I didn't know that until now either.
if there's one thing I could leave people with, is like, if you're going to quit drinking, if you're going to quit any substance, like you need professional help. Like you need to see a doctor. There's a way, you can ultimately, he did stop drinking, but he died from an alcohol withdrawal seizure
Wow.
because
Wow.
he wasn't, he was very stubborn about the doctor, but also I didn't know that you could have that. Like I thought people could quit cold turkey, and some people can, but not everybody can. And so that's one of the hardest things that I think that hit me about his death, was that at the time he actually was trying to stop, and that ultimately is what led to his seizure, the last seizure that he had.
Wow. Yeah, I think I had heard that too before, that that's something that you have to like wean yourself off of alcohol, because I quit cold
Hmm.
turkey like 10 years ago, and then like 9 years ago. Oh my God, today's my sober anniversary.
No
Oh my God, no
way!
way!
Thank you. That is so
Felicidades!
funny.
What a milestone, Curly. Qué
I'm
honor
literally
that we're
That is,
celebrating
I
that
this
is so funny. I looked
know.
down
moment.
at the calendar.
That's
And I want to
amazing.
honor your friend too in their journey, because I do know that like addiction is not easy. Like it is really hard. It is something that you like struggle with. And I think that you're right. Like for me, like why didn't your friend get those 10 years too? Like it feels like an injustice. It feels
Hmm.
like one of the things I watched, both of my tia and my abuela go from like being strong women to being like kind of like just literally just flesh and bones in the bed, still in their mind, but the body like not really working. And one of the things that I always tell people is like, till the day she died, my abuela always was talking shit about her ex-husband. Till the day my tia died, she always wanted to look into the eyes of her husband and her kid. She didn't care. She was happy to see all of us, right? But like when her husband walked through the room, she would wake up in bed and just stare. And I'm like, oh, you never stop loving. Like you never stop the habits, all the habits that you have every
Never,
day. Like
never.
it doesn't ever end. And so you kind of think like with people who pass away early, you kind of go like, they had dreams, they had like expectations of like a promotion, right? Like they wanted to fall in love and get property or do whatever, travel. And so I think that when you see that they don't get those, like it does hurt you in a lot of ways. It does hit differently.
And you know, it also makes you want to live live life in a different way, not just to honor their legacy, but even to continue things they started. I know that in my case, you all, like I do media today because my mom was a journalist and she had so many dreams for herself that it really made me even pivot my career. And I was like, there's so much left for her to do. And I grew up in the
Yeah.
newsrooms with her that like I am her continuation. I have to continue this legacy in a way because there's so much she didn't do. And so for me, it was such a pivotal way to just realign my life. And I know I lived my grief in a lot of ways in doing, you know,
Mhm.
to like reroute because of her passing. I'm curious how you all changed your own lives after your tia, your grandma passed, Curly, after your friend passed, Andres. What has changed for you all?
I relate to what you said so much about, like, carrying on this torch, how your mom was a journalist. Like both my mom and my abuelita were both ESL teachers. And
Wow.
after my abuelita passed, I kind of like, the pandemic happened after that, and I fell into social media content creation. It wasn't anything that I planned. And I kind of just found myself like teaching, but also making people laugh about like Latinidad and learning Spanish. And it definitely made me feel like, her and my abuelito made so many sacrifices just for me to be here, that it's just like, I don't know, I guess it brought a passion to me. And similarly, when my best friend passed away, it kind of was a wake up call about my own health and like how I was living my life, and just being like, I never want anybody in my family or friends to feel the way I'm feeling about him right now. So like it really was just a wake up call. It made me want to take better care of myself.
Did you stop drinking, Andres?
I stopped drinking, and it was not intentional, and I never felt like I had a drinking problem, and that may be not true, but I guess because I grew up in New Orleans in a Catholic family, drinking was such a part of our culture.
Same.
Alcoholism was a little normalized in my family. So I was like comparing myself to these extremes. So I was like, I'm not there. But then when I lost Luke to alcohol, like it it disgusted me. I was like, I don't even, and I like to drink socially, but I was like, I didn't drink for like almost 8 months after
Wow.
he passed. Just not
Wow.
even, and it wasn't like I was feeling like I don't know, it's weird. I wasn't like actively trying not to. I just like, I was like, it was kind of like the villain in my life now. I was like, you took this away from me and I don't want anything to do with you.
Wow. Curly, I'm so curious what comes up for you in this 10-year anniversary
Oh my
of being
God.
sober. As you're hearing Andres share this,
It's crazy on
what's
this
coming
because
up?
when I went sober, I made this video. I put out this video about like my journey. Like I think I was only like 6 months in or something, but I wrote a letter to alcohol and I was like, it's wild how you used to be my friend. Like you used to help me. Like when I was scared at a party and I was afraid to talk to people, you used to help me. Like if I needed to just like want to just dance on the dance floor, like you were there. And somewhere along the line, you became this thing that is now destroying me, like a poison, right? Like you said, like the enemy, like somebody that took your friend away. Um, it's interesting. I think that like we kind of it's always in like the background for me in a lot of ways. Like I sometimes get like I wonder how grief will play a part in even my own addiction. Like I always tell people, I'm like, if something ever happens to like my parents or my sister or my nephews, like I'm like, you better watch me, like lock me up, like take me away. Like there's no, because like one of the things I think that I always say that death informs life, right? Like, and in
Mm,
death, I it's wild because it's kind of the last um punctuation mark of the last sentence of a book, right? Like that's just it. Like, and it doesn't matter what you did in the book. It doesn't matter if you like. I always say like this is a really bad example, but this is the example that I always give, and it's whatever. But I'm like, you could literally walk into LA traffic, take a massive in the fucking 101, be in headlines, be in the news. Everybody would be talking about it. Everybody would be like, girl, this person was taking the shit on the freeway today. People would be talking about it for forever. But somewhere along the line, all of us, you would die, we would all die, those records would go away, and nobody would really remember like what happened. So in my head, I'm like, do whatever you want. Like go out, be bold, be big, shoot your shot, like flirt with whatever. And it works both ways, right? Because then you're kind of like, well, what's the point of it all? Like, well, then why am I sober? Like, if like all these things are going on, like, why am I not enjoying a drink? Why am I not having a fucking cigarette? Like, if we're all gonna go. So I think that what death does and grief does is it kind of like asks you to like, or kind of like demands you to recalibrate in a lot of ways, right? Like, be like, well, despite or in spite of all these things, who am I still at my core, and how am I gonna like continue to move forward? But I think that looking back, I think in 9 years, you're like, the fact that I could forget, that I could just randomly stumble upon my sobriety day versus before, it was like day one, day two. By the way, that's me on vapes right now. I'm on day 8.
yeah, progress. Well, every day
Yeah,
I'm
counts.
on chugga,
Yes.
it
chugga,
really
chugga, chugga.
does.
No more vapes.
Oh my gosh. Everything that as you're talking, Curly, there's something that comes up for me as I'm like doing this motion of like the balance, which is in a way, we're talking here about what do you choose to grieve? Because for both of you, you and your 8-month cold turkey to honor your friend Luke Andres, and you, Curly, and your lifestyle change over the last 9 years, like you're also grieving that person that you were when alcohol was your friend. You're also grieving that person that, would fit in with the family party and normalize over drinking, Andres.
Hmm.
So how do you all think about what you also left behind and grieving that version of yourselves?
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like and Curly, I think you put it so well, like about a book and like being the period. I feel like so many people will say things like, oh, this is a new chapter in your life. But like when my parents passed and when my friend passed, it felt like this is a whole different book. Like that book is done and it's on the shelf, and now you're starting a whole new book. And that's what it felt like for me. And I feel like, I don't know, I think that grieving over the memories that I had with, my abuelita and my abuelito, my friend. It's a very hard part, obviously, but what was harder for me to grieve is like the future that now I have to have without
Wow.
them. And it also, what feels even more painful is like, you know, you obviously are going to be sad when you're missing people and when you're having hard days. Like my abuelita, just like you said, Curly, like my abuelita was my champion. Like she would just like did anything for me and was always there for me. So when I obviously have sad days, I miss her. And I also miss my best friend because, we just had nothing was off limits for us. Like we talked about everything. But then something I've also come to realize is like happy days can be even harder. Like I just accomplished this and like I still, have that reflex of, with Luke, it's been more recent. So I still have that reflex of like, oh my God, like this just happened. And it's like, I don't know, sometimes that actually hurts even more because it's like I have this whole new thing that just happened in my life and I can't even share it with the people that I like want to share it the most with.
Wow, yeah. I'm like fighting tears, like just like listening to both of your stories. I'm like, like I'm getting that pressure in my face. By the way, I still talk to people who passed over. I talk to my grandma every day. So like, talk to Luke, say it
How do
out
you talk to
loud.
them, Curly? What do you say to her?
I literally am like, I just say hi. Like I make it a point to at least say hi. Say like, oh, help me with this. Can you guys help me with that? Or like, I hope you're doing good. But I make it a point to say it out loud. I have this like
Oh, I love
this
that.
like belief, and I talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time. Like, in the Bible, they talk about how like God was the Word, right? In the beginning, was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And I believe that all of us are blessed with the same sort of spark of the Creator, where we can voice people back into creation, right? We can speak them back to life. And so when I say Gladys's name out loud, or my Tia Regina's name out loud, or even my pitbull that passed away, Frank, like I feel like I'm the vibration of my chords is somewhere bringing them alive. And it's crazy because I do this thing. I have one abuelita on this side and my other abuela's on the other side. And I would do this thing where the portrait of my other abuela was really high up, and I would come in and I would like kiss it and say hi to her. And I have this friend, before we were friends, he's this amazing medium, Andre Barrera. But Andre Barrera, I went to high school with him. AJ Barrera. His name is AJ Barrera. He was like telling me, like, if I come into your place and I make an immediate right, is there like kind of like a saint, like an altar, like, or like a memorial for your grandma? And I was like, there is. And he was like, do you kiss it? And I'm like, there's no way that he would know that that's how I
Wow.
do it because it's so high up. And he was like,
Yeah.
they feel that, like they feel those vibrations every time you talk to them,
Wow.
every time you like send them love, it kind of like bubbles up and they feel it, you know? And so I feel like, even talking to Luke, like you're right, like though it that's one, the belief part of it. I want to believe with all my heart that that's what happens, but also just the emptiness of it, of course, of you being like, I really want to like call you and tell you about my day. And it's interesting too how that feeling can kind of translate into so many other aspects of our life, right? It could be like a best friend that you don't talk to anymore and they're still there. It could be like an ex, somebody that you were in a relationship with, someone that you broke up with, got a divorce from, like these things that you're just like wanting to um connect with somebody or tap into the part of your life in the way that you're used to and just like no longer exists, I guess, in this timeline. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I think even the good days tend to be really hard.
I feel like I'm somewhere in between both of you all, know? Like as I think of you, and then sometimes I use like a detachment to protect myself from my own grief when I think of my mom not
Hmm.
being physically there to see me and my daughter. Like I would love to have a mom-daughter bonding day. Mom-daughter granddaughter
Hmm.
bonding day, and like that's never gonna happen. And in my days when I'm happiest with my daughter is when I'm like, damn, like my mom's not here for it, and it doesn't feel like enough to know that she's always with me, like you're saying,
Yeah.
Curly. But
Yeah.
also I also haven't done it enough. Now that I think about it, it's like I don't know if it's that I'm scared that it won't feel good enough to talk to my mom and not have her be a memory as much as you're sharing, but it does feel so, like, just hearing you say that, it feels so healing. And I get a little bit teary. I'm like, yeah, I don't really talk to my mom that much. I don't say her name out loud. And it's not even taboo. It's just like, I feel like it's not going to work. So I'm not even going to try it, because if I try it and it doesn't work, it's going to be more devastating. I'm going to have more grief.
Yeah.
Thanks, Curly.
I feel that so
Like,
hard.
it's all your fault, Curly.
Well, I think it's so funny because when I told that story I wish I could show you, but the picture of my abuela was in my mom's house before. And she had replaced it with her grandkids, with my nephews. She put different pictures and she put my grandma's photo down. When I was like, Mom, where is her picture? Like, I want that picture. If you don't want it, I want it. And she's like, oh, it's in the garage. So I'm like, okay, go look for it. I'll go look for it. I want it. So then when I put it up and my friend told me that story, there was just, you know what I mean? There was just like so many different things that had to happen for my friend to even know that. And then my mom and my sister, they brought their photos back up and they made sure all their photos were up and they made sure that they were talking more. And so it kind of is this thing where I'm like, yeah, talk to them, because I feel like, and that does hurt so much to even think about, like, yeah, those moments that you wish your mom was there. Like, I was like fighting that. Like, I was fighting not to cry, because I'm like, of course you want your mom to see that. Like, of course you want those moments. But I also think that two things can exist at the same time. You can certainly feel that way and yearn for her and want her there. And you can also sneak in a little hello, a little I love you, like, you know, while you're driving, while you're listening to music, while you're writing. Like, it's just so beautiful to just like even whisper their name or scream their name out in your car. Roll down all your windows, turn up, I don't know, whatever song you guys used to listen to, and just scream their name and just be like, I love you wherever you are. I love you, I love you, I love you.
Oh, I love that so much.
I love that too. And I feel like now that I think about it, like, I guess I do talk to them sometimes, like, especially since Luke, it's been more recent. Like, I have like a prayer card of his that I like have just sitting on a shelf. And like, one of the things him and I, like, our biggest bonding was like watching TV. We're TV addicts. We love watching TV. And so like now, like, it's hard watching shows now that have come out that like him and I were waiting for. And like, but I do find myself like, even if something like gossip or something comes on the TV, I'll just like look at the picture of him and I'm like, oh my God. Or I'll say like, I'll be like, this is like, remember when we did this? That's kind of like this episode. And like with my abuelita and abuelito, I feel like it's kind of different because with them, I had like this relationship that religion was a big part of. And, you know, I was raised very Catholic and they were both, you know, devout Catholics. So religion was such a big thing for them. So I find myself talking to them more like when I find myself praying. And like I said, I have a complicated relationship with my religion, but I do find myself like when I pray, I'm like, abuelito y abuelita and abuelito, like, please, like, you know, look out for me for this or for that. And that is kind of a soothing thing for sure.
It sounds like we have had such core pillars of support pass on in each of our lives that we've in some ways all replaced them. No, that never, they're irreplaceable, but healed through our spiritual journeys. So as I hear you talking, Curly, like you have such a beautiful relationship with the soul of the people you've lost, right? Like you talk to them, you invoke them, you bring them in, you have this altar. You, Andres, like you're finding your prayer and you're, you know, exploring your spirituality, and you have this image of Luke, and you know, invoke your abuelito and your abuelita through their essence. For me, I've done it all. Like I've done the family constellations, and I like, you know, I'm like, did an altar for the first time this year for Dia de Muertos.
Me
It was
too.
my first time, Andres, doing it, and I was so like
Same.
it had been weighing on me, and like I'm like, why am I rejecting this again? Is it the fear that it's not gonna do anything, and so like it's gonna be all Curly's fault again?
Oh my god, it's always my
Like,
fault. I'm sorry.
I was telling Andres that I did an altar for my family who has passed on, and friends who have passed on for the first time ever, and it had been sitting on my soul, and I finally did it, and I was like, why have I been rejecting doing this so much? Like, why did it take me 4 years to actually do it? And I think it's that fear that it's not gonna feel right once it's there. And it was beautiful and amazing. And I put music and I showed my daughter, and it was so healing. So
Yes.
I'm like weaving our stories of spirituality and healing as a way that we've each chosen to process grief. But I want to know who else in your life has helped you heal, and how else have you all been healing in this grieving journey, since again these were pillars of support for us. Like, this wasn't just like, you know, a friend you saw every once in a while. Like, these were our people. Like,
Mhm.
who has stepped in, and what else along with your spiritual journeys have stepped in this time for you all?
Yeah, I feel like one of the people that I has really stepped in is like one of my best friends, Sonam. They lost their dad like in the first wave of COVID, and they understand like the grief. I feel like something that I'm sure other people that have dealt with grief deal with once they lose someone is like it's kind of like certain people won't understand unless they've lost someone too, and I feel like with them we've supported each other. And I don't know, I feel like we're just always checking in on each other, and especially since, you know, my other best friend Luke died. They've as soon as that happened, like I had to go. My friend Sonam lives in Philly, and I had to leave LA. Like I was like, I need to like go somewhere, and like I don't know. And they literally took care of me. And then I feel like when my abuelita and abuelito passed, I got very close to one of my tias who I'd always been close to, but she, you know, kind of took over the kind of brought her wing over me where my abuelita and abuelito no longer were. And I think that those are people that definitely stepped up, and I don't know, I feel like without their support, it would have been horrible. It was horrible, but it would have been more horrible.
Yeah, I feel very lucky to be a part of a lot of people's lives, or like have a community, I guess, of people that, for better or for worse, we've all either dealt with grief in some sort of way, or we know how to like have that conversation. Because what I've noticed is that people who haven't necessarily dealt with a death, and this was me too, I didn't know how to hold space. I didn't know how to like have a conversation with somebody. I, you know, would see somebody lose a loved one, and then a few months later they would post online and they looked happy. So I would be like, oh, I guess they're okay. Like, you don't think about kind of like the fluctuation of grief, you know, like the ebbs and flows of it, the ups and downs, how like some days are better than others, and some days suck. And you know what they say, like grief is not linear.
And I think it's forever in many ways, Curly. It's just something
I
you
think
live
so
with,
too.
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
It never really goes
Yeah, and
away.
so, you know, I think that like a lot of people, I've been very grateful who have been there for me, and just exchange of perspective and ideas in terms of grief is always just like helpful. Like, and just sometimes just being next to somebody and like hanging with them, and being like, I'm just gonna come over and I'm gonna make us something to eat, or like I'm gonna come over and I'm bringing snacks. Like, you know, I've had instances where I've told friends like, I'm just gonna sleep over. Like, I just want you to know that there's somebody in the house. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Um
I feel like those are such powerful things, Curly, because so many people like death is so taboo, like in American culture. I feel like that people aren't you're never really taught how to talk
We're
about
not.
death. And whenever somebody has a friend or a loved one that loses somebody, it's like this immense weight, because you're like, you know, like there's nothing that you can do that is going to bring back the person that they lost. And a lot of people just like don't know how to like what to say. Like, of course, everyone's like, "Oh, my condolences. Like, I'm so sorry for your loss." But I feel like a love language that can be implemented by people that have someone they love that lost someone is kind of just like like what Curly said, like, oh, I'm gonna come over and I'm gonna cook you some dinner, or I'm gonna do your laundry for you. I'm gonna do this or that, because those basic necessities, like taking care of yourself, right, especially immediately after someone passing away, are just become impossible. Like you forget, to
You have no
do
energy.
these things. Exactly. You have no energy. So there's like these basic, everyday things that people can step in and kind of do for you or help you, or like it makes a huge difference.
I love that advice, Andres. When I'm thinking of the short, medium, long term, to use this like nerdy framework, what I would tell our audience listening and wondering how to better support people who have gone through any sort of grief is, in the medium term, say their name. Like you're saying, Curly, talk about that person. Remember the anniversary of their passing, or like share when there is an anecdote about the dog that passed on, or the mom, or, if a person, lost a huge opportunity they were hoping to get, like don't pretend like that didn't happen. Like the Latin Grammys, they're happening. We're in the Latin Grammy period. If that person was like dreaming of getting the Grammy, don't pretend that like it's not happening. Be like, oh, I know this must have been so hard for you. Like, I know it's the Latin Grammys right now. Like, I know you wish you were on that stage. Again, I'm giving all these examples because I think a big part that people don't understand is like when you have a loss, like you just want to pretend that loss didn't happen and not engage with it with the people in your life. And in the medium term, that matters too. Like I want to talk about how that's part of my life. So as you give that short term such amazing advice, Andres, I think in the medium and even long term, that's something I would ask people to do for anyone in your life too that's gone through something.
Yeah, I did want to say too that sometimes people don't even know that they're grieving, right? Like sometimes people have no idea. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I'm just feeling some sort of way," and maybe they're sleeping a little bit too much, or maybe they're eating a little bit more, or maybe they're just like not feeling like themselves, and you feel guilty about certain emotions, and it takes somebody else to be like, it sounds like you're grieving, and kind of giving yourself the permission of being like, it's okay to grieve, it's okay to mourn. It really doesn't matter what it is. It could be a job, it could be like I keep saying, relationships. Like it's just this emotion of like what was is no longer. And I think that yearning for those moments that have passed is okay, and going through the emotions of figuring out how you feel. Because my sister, por ejemplo, she's the type where like she doesn't
Emote, maybe?
She doesn't like to talk about it. Like for her, she's one of those people that if she cries, like she doesn't want to cry. She goes into the ugly cry and she doesn't want to cry and she doesn't want to do it. Me, I'm the opposite. Like I want to go into the ugly cry. If I go into the ugly cry, I'm like, oh, I know that I loved you. Because not much makes me go into the ugly cry. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like, even just knowing like sometimes what's happening to you is also really hard, but it's a complicated emotion for sure.
And it takes all of us in each other's lives to watch out for each other and give that community support that we've been talking about. You, Andres, shout out to the people who have stepped up in your life. And you, Curly, shout out to the relationships that you've cultivated that have brought you that safe haven as you grieve as well.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that too.
Do you all want to say anything else before we end?
I think I'll just jump on what Curly said. Like some people don't know when they're grieving, and some people think that grief is just about death. And obviously that is a huge part of grief. But like losing a job, losing a spouse, like a relationship, breaking up with someone, missing an opportunity, like those are moments of grief too. And I feel like, I don't know, I one of my biggest hurdles is that like I know that there's so many people that love me and like want to take care of me, but they don't know what to say. And luckily I have people that do. But I think just like this is a universal experience. Everybody is going to have somebody that's going to pass away, and everybody's going to have to take care of somebody that had somebody pass away. And I feel like it's just a conversation that the younger you can have it, like the better. Like I know this sounds kind of dark, but I feel like having a dog, like having pets, like for your children is like such a good way to kind of like have them experience great, like, a dog might only live, 15 years or whatever. And when you're little, like having that experience, like obviously nothing can prepare you for grief, but it's like it gives you the sad opportunity to like learn about grief and to be open with your family and your loved ones about loss. And I think that even in like religion, sometimes it's kind of just like, oh, está con Dios, like so everything happens for a reason. But it's like, what, like, what's the reason that a 30-year-old passed away? Like there can't, like, it's just being there for each other and talking about it, and not being scared to have that uncomfortable conversation, because if you don't have that uncomfortable conversation, you're going to be uncomfortable for way
Yeah,
longer.
absolutely. Yeah, I would echo that too. Just, I think that grief is something that it's part of the universal experience of being human. One of my besties, Mish Prada, her mom passed away as well. And she was saying that when people pass away and you're in these moments, it's some of the most sacred parts of just being alive as a human. And it is in moving through those spaces that you become an elder, right? It is in moving through
Wow.
those spaces that you become someone that is like, oh no, I've been there. I know what
Mm.
it's like, and I'm here to show you that you can survive. I believe that in the way that life can surprise us with deaths and things that make us really sad, it can also surprise us with those happy moments. We can have those moments where things just fall in our laps, a happy memory, a paycheck, a new love, you meet somebody at the supermarket in the cookie aisle. I hope that people understand that grief, much like everything else in life, much like every other emotion, is truly just passing. And if you can get through it and get to the other end, hopefully we will. It is my hope and also my prayer that we see better days and softer days, I
Oh,
would say.
you all are truly magic. Thank you for the vulnerability and this just heart-filled conversation. Thank you.